The following Pharma Essentia podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and cannot be considered as medical advice. Please speak to a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Kay.
And hello, watchers, listeners, our producer in the booth, our friends at home.
Literally everybody else. Hi.
Welcome back to the PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow.
A podcast about polycythemia vera.
Brought to you by Pharma Essentia.
Gee, thanks, Pharma Essentia.
Josh, what do you think of when I say network?
Being really uncomfortable around a bunch of people wearing name tags and polos and people reciting their resumes. I hate networking events. Why? What do you think of?
Well, I think of the Academy Award-winning 2010 drama The Social Network, directed by David Fincher, written by Aaron Sorkin, and starring Jesse Eisenberg.
You know, sometimes it's hard to tell you went to film school.
96% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Huge oversight for that movie to not include how much of a hub Facebook is for the polycythemia vera community. Maybe we should email Aaron Sorkin.
Funny that you mentioned that.
Normally for me, I retreat into Facebook TV made me a lot more Facebook person.
So you were trying to get me to guess The Social Network to get us to Facebook? Okay, I don't know if this is your best hook.
Well, the Facebook connection was a happy coincidence, and then I got a little distracted by the 2011 Golden Globe Best Picture winner. Today, I want to talk about networks.
Oh, like support networks? Family and friends that help you get along your journey living with PV.
One could even call them social networks.
All right, rein it in, Kay.
Right. Sorry. Today, we're talking about utilizing your support groups of family and friends. We'll touch on helpful tips for communication, as well as the benefits of open communication, and so much more.
What a pitch. Fine. I'll stick around. Who are we talking to today?
My name is Steven Ames. I'm from the Southeast Texas area near Houston. Professionally, I'm a knowledge management consultant, so we deal with a lot of regulation, how to help people do their job in my company. I guess personally, I'm very outdoorsy. I like being outside, whether in my garden, taking care of my chickens and ducks, or fishing.
Oh, my God. I love chickens and ducks. Do you think he can send us some pictures? Like, what are their names?
Now look who's off track.
Well, maybe his chickens and ducks are a part of his support network. Fine, we can move on. What is Steven's relationship to PV?
I was diagnosed kind of at the height of COVID.
Whoa, that is a crazy time to get diagnosed with PV. I could see someone confusing the symptoms of PV with COVID, like brain fog, lethargy.
Anything you had, people thought COVID. So my family's had COVID, so I started feeling kind of bad, had some swelling lymph nodes. You know, looking back, there's a lot of things I know now that, it points to polycythemia vera. That back then I just thought, I was feeling bad. I was feeling bad and my lymph nodes were swollen, so I went to my GP. He ran some tests, and that's when he noticed, I guess my counts kind of elevated the last 2 or 3 blood tests over time. And so then he sent me for further testing.
Getting diagnosis for a rare cancer is challenging enough, what with having multiple specialists to make appointments with, then waiting for test results, which can sometimes take several weeks.
And I can only imagine trying to get a diagnosis during the height of COVID. That would be so much more difficult.
It was a crazy time to be diagnosed. We want to do other tests, like CT scans and other blood work. But like I said, my family kept getting COVID, so I had to keep canceling tests because, you can't be around, 2 or 3 weeks prior, whatever the rules were back then. So I don't know how many times I canceled and rescheduled tests because, I was exposed to somebody. So it was just a very frustrating time, especially, when you hear those words. I had an oncologist call me. It's like, I just want to get to the point, what the heck is going on? But at that time, you had all these rules and regulation, what you could and couldn't do. It was just very frustrating.
The time between taking those tests and finding out your diagnosis is so nerve-wracking. It must have been so hard dealing with the extra regulations and cancellations on top of all of that. So when Steven did finally get a diagnosis, what was that like?
I answered a number. I normally don't answer unknown numbers, but it was from, it looked kind of legit, it looked different, had a person name and a local number. I said, let me give it a shot. She introduced herself and said she was from an oncologist. I was like, why is an oncologist calling me? So, it was funny because I generally don't think of myself as an inpatient person, but I was like, when can I come into this visit? And she was like, well, we can see you next Friday. And I was like, it was like a Wednesday or something. It was, something I was like, no, I had some other tests actually for cardiologist stuff already scheduled. And I was like, no, you don't have anything sooner? Well, we can do this afternoon, but most people, I said, I'm not most people. When can I be there? Type thing. So that was that. I didn't, and I'll allude to this more later in probably the conversation, but the first oncologist I had really wasn't a great. At first, I thought it was a poor doctor, but from now I know it's his lack of knowledge with MPNs. And so some of the answers, when they were Googling information to give to me, I was like, well, I'm a pretty good researcher. I can Google, but I wanted more personal answers. I had a big, nice sandwich I just made for lunch. I left on the counter, went to the doctor's office. He really didn't tell me anything, pull some more blood, and then sent me on my way, wait 2 weeks. And that was frustration, right? I've already had a place where it was 6 to 8 weeks leading up to getting to this point. And then you just say, hey, yeah, at that point, you didn't tell me anything about polycythemia vera. Just come back, do these tests. We'll come back in a couple of weeks to see what happens.
It is so frustrating to be left in the dark, waiting for information on something so critical and life-altering.
This feels like a really good point to remind listeners that you can always seek second opinions or other healthcare specialists if you feel like your first doctor isn't a great fit. Is that what Steven ended up doing? How did he proceed from there?
So it was very frustrating. And then to get the diagnosis with very little information and some key things, like he didn't really take a good history of my past medical history, I felt like I had that overwhelming frustration. The funny part about it is, and I'll probably be a broken record on this, and if you follow me anywhere on forums when I'm talking about things, I was like, I'm really finding a doctor who knows about it, because my first oncologist, no, it's not a cancer, don't worry about it. It was just a very frustrating time. Like, am I really sick? Am I not sick? And then as I started learning about the disease itself, I had clots 3 years prior to my official diagnosis. So I had all of a sudden all these red signs. You asked me originally, what was yours leading up to? It was just a lymph node. But looking back, terrible night sweats, terrible sweats, ache and pains. And of course, I was that age where I was in my mid 40s, right? So everybody tell you, oh, you're getting older, things start hurting on you. And so I was like, wait a minute, it really is not that point. You hear other people, age is just in your mind or whatever, how you feel. But I was like, I feel these for real. What's going on? And so after looking back, about 2/3 of the common symptom, check. So yeah, so there was a gamut of, I guess, frustration for it was taking so long to get an official diagnosis. The doctor almost put it off, like, oh, you don't have a problem, type thing. We can just do this, whatever type thing. So it was just a very frustrating time, I guess, really, if I had to sum it up one word, it's probably frustrating, just so it took so long and the lack of knowledge I got or information from that team, that original team of mine.
Yeah, frustrating is the only word for it. We've talked about that dismissal he's referring to a bit in the past. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's not really a cancer. Stuff like that is supposed to make you feel better, but really just makes you feel invalidated.
Exactly. It's a bummer to hear that this was Steven's introduction to polycythemia vera. Luckily, he was able to secure a healthcare team that was a better fit for him.
Ironically, thankfully, I have a family friend that my dad carpooled with for years. I went to school with his kids, and we knew he had headaches a lot. And so I was talking to him, and he's the one that actually told me to go to one of the local cancer centers. They have a dedicated team there that specializes in PNs. And at that point, I just was learning the word PV and polycythemia vera. So MPNs, I still can't say anything. Myeloplasms, I still flub it up. So
okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one who struggles with
myeloproliferative neoplasms?
You didn't let me finish. That's exactly what I was going to say, yes.
But I didn't realize you had a specialized teams that actually study and research this.
We are going to hear more from Steven about his journey with polycythemia vera and how he utilizes his support network right after this quick break.
So you're learning about PV on the PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow. Now get ready to take the next steps on your PV journey with What's Next PV, an educational site on everything polycythemia vera.
Knowing what's next can help inform the decisions you and your doctor make about the future and is important to your health. What's Next PV can help you understand test results, set goals for the management of your PV, and make a plan to advocate for yourself. Check out www.whatsnextpv.com to learn more.
And we're back.
Thank you for sticking around.
So Steven's initial diagnosis experience was a bit of a bumpy road. Steven was diagnosed during COVID, which means it's been a few years. So what has he learned about PV since then?
Let's hear some of the highlights.
I think it's very important for you to know your options. Different diagnostic tests, why tests are done, different drug options you can take. I talk with several people from other countries. They don't have the same options. You have to learn what's available for you personally, and finding that best doctor you have. And there's several sites out there that has great resources what to ask your doctor to, so you can gauge if they are more knowledgeable in treating MPNs, and polycythemia and things of that nature. It's funny, I slipped up with that polycythemia without the vera. That's another thing I've learned. There's so many people. There's two types of polycythemia. There's polycythemia no vera and polycythemia vera, and there's a lot of folks that the doctors don't even get it straight to when you announce, you're not telling me enough information to make me think you have PV. And it's weird because they're different root causes. So I think it's very important to have that underlying knowledge of the mechanics of things, so that way you can find the appropriate and make the appropriate decision, because it's all personalized choice, right? I've got tons of studies and videos about different things, and I have my own personal opinions, what I do and why I chose the treatment path I own, but I think it's more important to share with others, like, hey, there's all these other studies, other options you're out here, then you got to choose that best option for you.
I really admire Steven here. In any rare disease space, it can be extremely overwhelming getting informed on your own, but it is also so essential when it comes to taking control over your PV and your PV treatment.
Just to recap, knowing that baseline knowledge of why things, so many people just take a doctor's word for granted. Understanding the why, because a lot of time a doctor doesn't. That leads into my second point: find a doctor is experienced in polycythemia vera, because otherwise we could have a simple conversation of just one simple word of vera, two different diseases, and you're down a rabbit hole of treatment the wrong thing. So having that doctor knowledge, and then read up on yourself, because ultimately you're your best advocate.
Maybe a quick round of applause here. I love that message. You are your best advocate.
No matter what this thing is, you may not see things like I said it earlier. Looking back 4 or 5 years, I had clots, I had aches and pains and other things and headaches. One for me, headaches. I've never had headaches, in my whole life, and all of a sudden I started having headaches. That was is a key thing. I don't know why I didn't think about it. My wife has headaches all the time. I don't know, but for me, I rarely had a headache. And then two, no painkiller would touch it. Even prescription painkillers would touch the headache. So I didn't take anything for it. So knowing that history of what are classical disease symptoms, how they impact others, and how other people treat, I think it's really key to help you make the best decision how to go forward with what your treatment is.
Wow, there's a lot of gold in there. Doing your own research, coming to doctor's appointments with an understanding of your disease, finding resources online to support your research, participating in shared decision-making when it comes to what treatment is right for you, paying attention to your symptoms.
Agreed. A lot of what he's saying revolves around being an informed patient. It's so important to arm yourself with current information about PV and PV treatment.
Just like he said, you are your own best advocate.
Exactly.
I'd like to start digging into networks. Not the social network, Steven's Polycythemia Vera Support Network.
I wasn't even going to bring up the 2011 Critics' Choice Award-winning movie for Best Picture.
Yeah, sure you weren't. So when we're talking about Steven's network, where would we start? Who was the first person he told about his diagnosis, and how did that go?
It was weird. My wife works for a school, so obviously, I said I was impatient and wanted the same day appointment. So we kicked in our best friend. She's a 3-time cancer survivor, breast cancer. So I had a pretty strong silent partner just we were both that somber mode, right? When you hear that oncologist word, no matter what it is you're going to, it's a somberness around you type thing. So I've never been really shy about it. I mean, she has been around since my day one.
I'm really glad Steven had a friend to help him through that difficult time.
Me too. This also really highlights a good point about your support network. We often talk about family, caregivers, and healthcare providers, but friends can and do play such an important role as you navigate your diagnosis. This is a lesson, too, that Jesse Eisenberg's Mark Zuckerberg had to learn the hard way with Andrew Garfield.
Okay, Kay, enough. Let's get back to Steven.
And then we had to do more research and learn. It was a long, drawn-out process, right? Probably almost 6 weeks between I had this unknown condition that they really didn't explain well. They told me it was polycythemia vera, but then I had to do the research on my own, to switching to a cancer research center. And, oh yeah, you do have a cancer, you have options. And we started educating. And that's when I realized I had to start educating myself. I didn't hide it from that many people, but I was that classical, I have this little blood condition and things of that nature. I was, really to do it. I'm pretty open. I'll share things no matter what.
I want to talk about this for a minute. It can be really hard to share personal information about yourself like that, but it can also be so freeing. Keeping a secret carries emotional weight, while sharing your diagnosis has the potential to expand your support network. On the flip side, I'm wondering if Steven had any negative reactions to sharing his diagnosis so openly. I know cancer in general and PV in particular can be really misunderstood.
But I did discover early on, like at work, a lot of people at work, I mean, they started pulling projects away from me. I was like, no, I'm still a normal person. Let me know. I need to do things. I need to focus, direct myself, my energy. So don't do that. Now, I do know that I'm a little fuzzy in the head. I get headaches. I may not be up to my A game. So don't wait till I mess something up. Tell me, hey, what's going on? Do you need to, take a break or something? Tell me beforehand. That's the support I need.
Steven talks so fast, but this is another great moment where he advocates for himself and communicates through a misunderstanding.
Right. He's saying, let me tell you what I need. Communication like that can be awkward or even uncomfortable, but it is important.
I've had a wide network. I mean, I got close, my wife, and at the time my son was in high school, so he, immediately started trying to do more around the house and everything like that. But I found for me, it was better to tell people, but you just heard me kind of tear up a little bit in that expression. Closer family members, that does pull it. If I can empathize with, if I'm sharing it with somebody for another situation at work, several coworkers had other cancers in the past. And so it kind of brings that feelings in, and you really don't understand that whole, I mean, it's one of those clubs that you don't really want somebody part of because it's a whole different range of emotion. I mean, even though it's not the same cancer, but you empathize a lot more when you can relate to some, way someone feels or what they went through. So I've had a real good, like I said, I have several friends from work. I'm fortunate. I've been in my company for 25 years. So I have several long-term friends, several which had cancers in the past and stuff like that. So, I had people check on me, hey, how you doing type thing. And that helps out a lot.
So Steven has included his coworkers in his support network. Kay, I want you to know I'm here for you.
Thanks, Josh. It means a lot.
For me personally, and I know some people keep their cars closer and they don't tell people maybe outside their spouse or, type thing, even hiding from kids. I thought it was better to share people because I'm normally was very outgoing. I went from normally working 16, 18, 20 hours a day to wanting to sleep 14 hours a day. And I was still tired. So it was obvious I wasn't going to be able to hide it from people. In a lot of ways, I was forced to say things. I guess technically at work I could. Thankfully, one thing I would say about COVID, we were already working from home, so that was a great blessing for me. I think the last day I drove home from COVID, I had a 2-hour commute one way on the way home. So in the Houston area, traffic can be very terrible. I live on a good day 45 minutes from the office, so that was a very blessing because I don't think I could have drove 3 to 4 hours a day round trip and dealt what I deal with, especially. Thankfully, the office on the flip side is close to the work, so ironically it sounds, I got an exception to go in the office earlier to help manage going to my treatments and my initial appointments when I was doing more treatments and things. It was helpful to be able to, it's 15 minutes from the cancer center. So that helped out. So for me, I just found it was better to tell people.
So COVID was obviously not a good thing.
Obviously.
But Steven managed to make the most of it while working from home.
That could be a good tip for living and working with PV as well. It can be really challenging to communicate with your colleagues about your diagnosis. I mean, obviously, it's a really sensitive topic.
But it's so important to talk to your team or your supervisor about your needs surrounding PV.
Exactly. You can share what you feel comfortable sharing about your diagnosis so that you can continue to meet your responsibilities.
And so you can facilitate a conversation about what accommodations you might need to be successful, like maybe a hybrid work situation or working from home if you feel that's best for you.
Great point, Josh.
Okay, something has been missing from this episode so far.
Well, I know it is not my references to the Social Network 2010. I've been pretty much peppering those in whenever I can.
And I've been trying to cut you off as much as possible, but now might be the time. Usually when we talk about polycythemia vera and community, it always comes back to Facebook. Has Steven used Facebook? What does he think of Facebook?
And then ironically enough, two things happened. I was not a Facebook person. I was kind of anti-Facebook. And no matter what, I do get closer with people, like I said, that actually had a cancer. But with Facebook, two things happened. Is A, my son started doing some stuff in high school. It was easier to disseminate the information with him to multiple people with Facebook. And then when I got diagnosed, I found people that knew, I was one of those newbies where I could ask questions. Hey, is this, because you're trying to distinguish, is this just life or is it the disease type thing? So ironically, I was not a Facebook person, and PV made me a lot more Facebook person, type thing, especially supporting people. I know I'm thankful that I have a world-class cancer center in my backyard, and it's not hard to get to. So, sharing, there's a lot of people, I've got friends, like I said, all across Asia that don't have access, and it's I'm always find that struggle of, I don't want to say, go do this because, I'm not a doctor. I'm not that. I have a lot of research in this thing like that. So that's why I share a lot of the research.
I remember Dana from the first episode this season mentioning that as well, how you can give and receive support within your network, which strengthens your community overall.
So my team went from just local, my family and stuff initially, I guess, because of the height of COVID, to as things evolved, I had to, almost by force, I had to expand my support network because things were changing in my life where I couldn't do what I normally did or things of that nature. So I expanded pretty rapidly. I expanded my support network out. And I was really, I had to ring people in there. I had, from friends and, hey, what can we come do the house around the house, or what can we do here type thing. So yeah, so my support network is quite wide, especially at this point in time.
So Steven has talked about his family, his friends, his coworkers, his healthcare providers, and his online community.
Yeah, he's really covered all the bases.
In theory, Steven should feel completely supported. But we know from our previous conversations with patients that it's not always that simple. So I'm wondering if Steven feels as supported as it sounds he is. Is there anything he feels is still missing?
If I'm honestly answering that question, I think it depends on the day. I do still feel a lot of people don't understand because, this is the unseen disease, or a unseen disease. I can't say it's the disease, but it's a disease where most people don't look sick. So they don't understand. I mean, a simple thing is, like I said, I have chickens and ducks. Feed comes in 50-pound bags. Same day, walking just, 50 yards to put the feed in the container. I can be carrying a 50-pound, no problem. Then I'll go grab the second bag of feed, third bag of feed, and it doesn't matter. It's not like my fourth bag of feed. It doesn't matter. I just can't pick it up. It just, my strength leaves me like that. So I think it depends. When some things happen, they don't. Sometimes I don't have that. Even as supported, and I have a big support network. I'm not, I have it. But I think so. I don't think you ever can have enough because that's where I kind of pull the Facebook in, because even though I have friends that have other cancers, they still don't know how we feel, right? Type thing. So I think personally, the first time I got to meet other people with PV in the same room in person was great. I met a lot of people online, but meeting people in person is great. I see other areas of bigger cancer centers, they have meetups where the people meet up, not all the time. I was like, I was surprised. I have a big cancer center near me, but we don't really have that meetup group. Every once in a while, there's one in Texas that try to meet up, but I think it's met up once in the last 3 years. So I think generally speaking, my day-to-day function, yes, I have a good network. But my bad days when I don't feel my best, it's kind of hard because, type thing. And then I get hard on myself. Like, if I can't do something, I get frustrated. And then, you got to catch yourself not spiraling down type thing. So, and normally for me, I retreat into Facebook. I know it sounds corny as it sounds. I retreat into Facebook because you talk to people. And for me, it's providing support to other people. I know people a lot off worse than I am. So that energizes me, right? If I can help somebody, hey, point them to a direction to say, hey, go listen to this video, go listen to this podcast or whatever, if I know of something, and I've got a long list of support on. So that's my personal support. When I can't get that physical support from somebody, if I know I'm lacking, I go out and try to help somebody else. And it's like, oh, you find someone else dealing with a more difficult time than you, it puts your life in perspective, and then when you can give them a resource to help them, it just gives me personal gratification, which gets me out of my slump for the day.
Steven is saying he retreats into Facebook.
Perhaps like Jesse Eisenberg in the movie that you have referenced a couple times today.
Josh, I am so proud. But what I want to say is that when he's retreating into Facebook, he's really falling back into his community. As much as your family and friends can be there to support you, talking to someone who's going through the same diagnosis journey makes all the difference.
We've talked about that in the past, that gap in understanding when trying to communicate with your loved ones. Does Steven have any advice for us there?
I think you need a true understanding of your diagnosis. It's hard. A lot of people don't. They know one small aspect. my red blood counts are high, or JAK2, since that's a quantitative test where people is just a number on a report, people gravitate that to a lot, right? They sometimes don't even gravitate, like, for example, hematocrit is real important with PV. You'll hear more people focusing on JAK2 positive. Well, what's your hematocrit? What's your red blood count? You start asking this probing question, they don't have any clue what you're talking about. So I think the first step is to truly understand the condition yourself, because I guarantee you're going to be asked questions. And then I think that also, well, you look fine and you're not giving me any credible information about your disease. How sick are you really, type thing? And I've never heard of this disease type thing. So, for me, is understanding that. I mean, I get way technical, meaning like, there's roughly 100 to 150,000 people in the U.S. with it, so it's kind of rare. That helps set that boundary. So, I mean, I don't think you have to get that technical, but hey, it's technically a rare disease. Some of the things, if you say what your thing is, hey, I tested positive for this gene mutation. I think that it's a balancing act, not getting too technical, because like I said, I'm very technical and I can lose people real quickly. My training background, I can tell real quick when I lose somebody. I was like, oh, that's too much information, pull back. So, over the years, I think, those things, hey, I think while technically it's not a solid tumor cancer, it is, blood cells. So that's how it's classified. Some of those key points to make people understand, hey, this is a real deal. There's some, details here type thing. So I think that's the best thing, understand it yourself so you can, share it accurately to other people.
We haven't really talked about this before. Arming yourself with information about your diagnosis not only assists in conversations with your healthcare team, but also with how you share your diagnosis with your loved ones. Of course they have questions, just like how you as a patient had questions when you're first diagnosed. I love how Steven came so prepared.
Me too. Before we let Steven go, I wanted to know if he had any advice about how a community or a support network can really show up for someone who's just received a diagnosis. Everyone is different, and it's important to figure out what's best for you when it comes to discussing your diagnosis.
This is I'm going to follow up kind of like on the first one, educating yourself, because ultimately you're your best advocate. But at the same time, your loved ones. And my wife and my relationship, I'm the stronger researcher. I mean, I do a lot of that for my job. So me digging into core causes and things and information, it's just part of my daily function. So I jump into it. But on the flip side, if your person is not technically, my best friend, sometimes I wonder how he works the iPhone. He's just not a technical person. So if it was him getting diagnosed, I know I would need to jump in and start digging that information up.
We've been spending a lot of time this episode talking about how it's important for you as a patient to educate yourself. But this is a really good point. If you are a loved one or a caregiver or friend to someone with PV, educating yourself about polycythemia vera takes the burden off of the patient to educate you themselves.
On the flip side, if you, as the patient, are the stronger researcher, like Steven, sharing as much information as you can with the people closest to you can be really helpful. I feel like so often our loved ones want to support us, but they don't know how or what the needs are.
That's a good point. Sharing information that you have about your symptoms and diagnosis can be really helpful in providing direction to your loved ones for how they can support you.
I have another question about talking polycythemia vera with your family and friends.
Ask away.
It's obviously a really sensitive and emotional topic, and I was wondering how Steven navigates those conversations, or if he has any advice for someone who was diagnosed and needs to break the news to their family for the first time.
So your family member the best. What are their strengths and weaknesses type thing? Maybe if they're prone to like depression and overwhelm, you need to step in there and help them out, because anything like this will trigger those emotions on somebody, make them feel overwhelmed, or my life's over, or whatever, all those emotions you can think of.
It's so interesting to think about how you as the patient can help regulate the emotions of your loved ones.
Yeah, it all comes back to that communication. You hear how they're feeling, they hear how you're feeling, and you navigate the situation together.
In the past, we've talked about how your support group can help you in the doctor's appointments as well. Did Steven say anything about that?
So if it's your family member, same thing, you could be their best advocate, right? Hey, doc, I was listening to one of the doctors in New York just today on a call, recorded call, and he was like, it's so helpful to bring somebody into the office visit, because if I asked a question, well, how is Steven doing? I'm doing great. I did all this stuff. But, your support, wait a minute, what you just said the other day, XYZ, you weren't feeling good, or you didn't get up to 10 o'clock yesterday morning. They know you. So having that person that familiar with the core mechanics, right? And there's some there's some input there. You got to be familiar with the core mechanics of the disease and what to look for. Oh, you know what? He or she has been experiencing these two things, so they can, hey, let's tell the doctor. For me, and creating a shared note, I like sharing notes on my phone. When I'm my original days, my wife and our best friend Mona, I created a shared note in my phone, and I put my next visit, April 5th or whatever my visit was, questions for my doctor. And I put our note, and then they could add it to, if they noticed me do something, right, they add something in, he slept all day on Saturday the 12th, type thing, he didn't feel this or that, he was nauseous all day on the 24th or whatever the case is. Those are things, so that person great, right? Once you know the signs of the disease, you can, all right, you're that, you observe them so much of the time, you can say, all right, this is not their normal, so let's, act a doctor. I always tell my doctors, it's like, I'm going to give you a ton of information. You need information to make a decision, but I don't want to try to discern what the information, I try to keep it factual. That's why we did the shared notes, this date and time, type thing. This is what occurred. So it helps out, then the doctor, sometime my team's great. They'll grab my phone. They'll just start looking through my phone. They'll look, I want to see what your notes are. I have a question, and then I have a question, right? They'll both, if I read this online, type thing. So those type things, if we had a question, I was listening to this podcast and he mentions this, what about that? So those notes really help out from your personal symptoms, how you're experiencing, should I be experiencing this, or even data, right? Hey, I don't understand this concept. Can you elaborate on this for me?
Oh, I love the idea of a shared note. We've talked about taking notes and bringing notes to your doctor's appointment in the past, but starting a shared note between you as a patient with your caregiver or loved one is such a great idea. Maybe they're noticing some symptoms that you might have missed.
Agreed. This is actually something I've started doing recently with my migraines. I've recently started experiencing some migraines for the first time, and my good friend who has a history of migraines told me to start writing down all my symptoms and how long they lasted from the get-go. Having an exact date and time on your symptoms can be so extremely helpful when communicating with your doctor.
That's great. Well, not the migraines, but that you were able to get some helpful advice. And also, that's a really good example of you relying on your support network.
Very true, putting information into practice.
Before we wrap this up, I just want to emphasize a point that may have felt implicit, but is so important to living with PV and maneuvering through your PV journey.
What's that, Josh?
Whoever is in your support group, and however you choose to engage with them, it's most important to just have a support group, period. We've said it before, but this is a long journey and a confusing one. Knowing you're not alone and feeling support is critical to living with and managing your PV.
Very true. Whether it's your friends, your family, your healthcare providers, or social media, you aren't alone. Community is everywhere, even right here.
Which feels like a great place to start wrapping up this episode.
Thank you so much, Steven, for all of your valuable insights on living with PV and connecting with your community.
And thank you, listeners, for listening to another fantastic episode.
And thank you, David Fincher, for your groundbreaking 2010 biodrama.
Yeah, this has been the PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow, a podcast about polycythemia vera.
We'll see you next time. The PV Pod, Stories from the Marrow, is produced by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, and made possible thanks to our sponsor, Pharma Essentia. The PV Pod is hosted by me, Kay Vermeil, and my co-host, Josh Bragg. If you like the show, please share it with anyone for whom it might make a difference, and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll see you next time.